maybe if you have a comparative advantage in the agricultural sector, what could be the implications of not just focusing on comparative advantage in the industrial sector? Thank you so much.
If industrial upgrading should be always based on comparative advantage, latent or existing, how do you explain in your theory, Justin, that there have this voluntaristic element, that there have been always cases around Korean shipbuilding, Taiwanese steel, Brazilian aircraft, where it is really difficult to find the comparative advantage, except that there was a bunch of engineers around who had a rough idea how to do that, and that there was a bunch of politicians around to support them.
I spent the last 5 years in Benin, West Africa, and I was just wondering how to apply the approach to the LDCs. And well, Benin at least has a harbor and they have some cotton, but thinking about Mali or Burkina Faso, what would you say are the endowments for these countries to follow your approach, and how long would they have to wait, looking at labor costs that might be higher than in several Asian countries, to get there and to get going as well? Thank you.
For the first question about India, and for the food security issue, as I mentioned, it's agricultural sectors. And like India today, I think over 50% of the population still rely on agriculture. And for that, as I mentioned at the end, it's very important the government should bring in the new technologies to the agricultural sectors to increase the productivities of agricultural sectors. I think that if you bring new technologies and make the modern inputs like seeds, like fertilizers available, at the same time improve the marketing system, allow farmers to benefit from the improvement in their productivity, turn that into the improvement of their income. That will be good for poverty reduction, and that will be good for the food security issue. So that is one area, even I talk a lot about industrial upgrading, but at the end, I bring that attention. And I like to tell you that actually I started with as an agricultural economist. And even today, maybe I did not write anything for agriculture for maybe 20 years, but most people still call me agricultural economist. I'm proud to be an agricultural economist. Okay. And then the second one about how to identify the sectors, like shipbuilding in Korea in the 1970s. And the computers and telecommunication sector in Taiwan and so on. How to identify that? And that is what I try to do, because if I say following your competitive advantages, how to identify sector where you have competitive advantages, especially sector which is your latent competitive advantage, how to identify it? Latent competitive advantages means it's not there yet, right? But luckily, we can use both theory and historical experiences as I explained. Theory is that your competitive advantage is determined by your endowment structure. And so countries which have similar endowment structure, their competitive advantage should be similar. And for the high income country, if they're growing very dynamically, then they are going to graduate from those kind of sectors because their wage rate increase. And by that, it's their sunset industry that should be your sunrise industry, right? So that's my principle. First step, look into the other country, because competitive advantage is always compare, right? Look into other countries. Currently, their per capita income is about 100%. It's higher as yours. And how come 100%? That is a historical experiences. As I mentioned, starting from United Kingdom, then coming to Germany, France, coming to Japan, and also looking into Taiwan, Korea. They all identify sectors in countries which their per capita income is about 100% higher than theirs. And looking into the mature sectors in those economies. For example, Korea in the 1970s, they identify the shipping sectors. Well, shipping sectors, it's capital intensive, but it's mature sectors. And at that time, which country is the most advanced country in shipbuilding? Sweden. And Sweden has developed those kind of sectors for centuries. So with that, their per capita income at that time, Korea was about 30–40% of Sweden's per capita income. And so with the government facilitation entering into that sector, certainly quickly they turn into very competitive. And for Taiwan, when they entered into the ICT sectors, Taiwan did not have the sectors. But the way Taiwan did that was to invite the US multinational companies to relocate their labor-intensive operations to China, to Taiwan. And since it was very labor-intensive, it's mature sectors for the ICTs. And Taiwan's per capita income was at that time certainly was measured by purchasing power parity was about 20–30% of US per capita income. But they only entered into the most labor-intensive part of ICT, so they could have a comparative advantage. And especially that was brought in by the foreign direct investment. So that's the way I try to identify. Look into the country, their mature sectors, and they're going to graduate from that. And if your comparative advantage is not too far, your per capita income is not too far away, that means your comparative advantage is not too far away. And that should be, that should be a simple framework. Certainly, there are some kind of competitive framework. For example, Ricardo Hausmann have a similar idea called the product space. But I think that compared to his framework and my framework, first, mine is much simpler than his. That's one thing. And secondly, the chance for my framework to make mistakes is much smaller than his. And my argument is that industrial upgrading very often means you need to enter into sectors is completely new to you. But if you follow the product space, you can never go into sector which are completely new to you. But we know that a lot of low-income countries, currently they are mainly resources economy. They want to go into the manufacturing sectors. According to product space, you can never go into the manufacturing sectors. That's one thing. And secondly, a lot of countries, they follow the import substitution strategies. They do have some sectors which may be manufacturing sectors, but they go against their competitive advantages. And since they go against their competitive advantages, even in the product space, it exists, does not mean you should continue to develop the sectors. So my framework will be simpler and allow to move into the new sectors, and the chance of making mistake will be much smaller. Then the last one, like in African countries like Mali and so on, I'd like to say Mali have one very successful sector, mango, right? And the mango is natural resources intensive because you need to have good weather, those kind of soil facilities. And with the government facilitation, now if you go to Europe, well, I think maybe also in Germany, or you go to Paris, all the mango in the market was produced in Mali. And recently, I tried to apply the similar framework in African countries. Recently, we had some research in Ethiopia, in Tanzania, and also in Zambia. Try to apply this framework to identify the labor-intensive sectors which they are likely to develop. And we also like to apply this kind of framework to the Western Africa. So maybe next year I have more report that I can share with you about what kind of sectors in Mali or in Burkina Faso or Cameroon could develop.
Okay, I think we have time for another second round of questions.